The security guard burst out laughing. "Sir, you must be joking." Daniel blinked in confusion. "I'm not joking. I'm here to see my wife." The guard leaned back in his chair, still chuckling. "Your wife?" "Yes, Clara Mensa, the CEO." The guard wiped his eyes. "Sir, the CEO's husband already came here this morning. He comes here almost every week." The words hit Daniel like a slap. For a moment, he just stood there. 28 years of marriage, and a stranger at a security desk was telling him he wasn't his wife's husband. Daniel forced a small smile. "Oh, I see," he said quietly. "Maybe there's been some misunderstanding?" The guard shrugged. "It happens." Daniel nodded politely, turned around, and walked back toward the parking lot. But the moment he got into his car, his hands began to shake. He sat there staring at the steering wheel. The security guard's voice replayed in his mind. Her husband already came here this morning. Daniel whispered to himself, "What does that even mean?" For 28 years, he had been married to Clara. 28 years. He had met her when she was a young accountant working late nights in a tiny office downtown. Back then, she had dreams bigger than the city. "Daniel," she used to say with fire in her eyes, "one day I'm going to build a company that changes everything." He believed her. While others laughed at her ambition, Daniel stood by her side. When she worked until 2 a.m., he stayed awake waiting for her. When she doubted herself, he reminded her who she was. When her first business almost collapsed, he sold his own car to help her stay afloat. He remembered the night she cried on his shoulder. "I'm sorry," she had whispered. "I feel like I'm dragging you through my struggles." Daniel had kissed her forehead and said something he meant with all his heart. "We're not two people fighting life alone. We're a team." And they had been. Years passed. The small business grew into a large company, then into a corporation, then into something massive. Clara became one of the most powerful female CEOs in the country. Her face appeared on magazine covers. Business channels invited her for interviews. People called her a visionary. Daniel was proud. He was always proud. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. It started slowly. At first, it was just longer working hours, then late-night meetings, then sudden business trips. "Daniel, I have to travel tomorrow," she would say while packing quickly. "Where to?" he would ask. "Abuja, maybe Lagos. It's just business." He never questioned her. He trusted her. After all, this was the woman he had built his life with. But lately, something felt different. Her phone was always locked. She sometimes stepped outside to take calls. Sometimes she smiled at messages she never explained. Daniel tried to ignore it. He told himself he was being paranoid. But now, sitting in his car outside her office building, that security guard's words wouldn't stop echoing. Her husband comes here every week. Daniel rubbed his face. No, that's impossible. He started the engine and drove home. The entire drive felt longer than usual. Every traffic light felt like a pause in a nightmare he couldn't wake from. When he got home, the house felt unusually quiet. He sat in the living room staring at the clock. 7:30 p.m. Then his phone rang. It was Clara. Daniel stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "Hello?" Her voice sounded cheerful. "Hi, honey." "Hi. I just wanted to tell you I might be late tonight." Daniel leaned back slowly. "How late?" "Maybe around 11. We have an emergency board meeting." "A board meeting?" Daniel swallowed. "All right," he said calmly. "You sound tired. Everything okay?" "Yes, just a long day." "Well, don't wait up for me." "Okay. Love you." Daniel paused. Then he said it back. "Love you too." The call ended. Daniel slowly lowered his phone. He looked around the house they'd shared for nearly 30 decades. Photos covered the walls. pictures from their wedding, vacations, family gatherings, 28 years of memories, and suddenly he felt like a stranger in his own life. He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the night was settling in. His mind replayed the scene at the office gate again. The laughter, the certainty in the guard's voice. Her husband comes here every week. Daniel rubbed his face. No, that's impossible. The clock ticked slowly. 8:45 p.m., 9:30 p.m., 10:15 p.m. By the time the front door finally opened, it was exactly 11:02 p.m. Clara walked in looking elegant as always, dropping her handbag on the table. "Daniel?" she called softly. "You're awake?" "Yes." She smiled tiredly and kicked off her heels. Today was exhausting. Daniel studied her face. Nothing seemed unusual. No guilt, no nervousness, just the same confident woman he had known for decades. She walked over and kissed his cheek. "You should have slept." Daniel forced a small smile. "I was waiting." Clara sighed and loosened her jacket. "Meetings like this make me wish I had a normal job." Daniel looked directly into her eyes. "How was the board meeting?" She shrugged casually. "Long, boring, same old arguments about expansion." Daniel nodded slowly. Inside, a storm of questions was building, but he said nothing. Instead, he simply asked, "Did you eat?" Clara shook her head. "No time." "I'll warm something." "You don't have to." "It's fine." Daniel walked toward the kitchen. Behind him, Clara turned on the television like nothing had happened, like the day had been ordinary. But Daniel knew something had changed forever. And for the first time in 28 years, he wasn't sure who his wife really was. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like the video and drop a comment telling us what you think Daniel should do next. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this unbelievable story. Because what Daniel was about to discover would destroy everything he thought he knew. And the truth was far worse than he imagined. Daniel barely slept that night. He lay beside Clara in the darkness, staring at the ceiling while her breathing slowly settled into the calm rhythm of sleep. Every few minutes, his mind replayed the same sentence. Her husband comes here every week. He turned his head and looked at Clara. She looked peaceful, the same woman he had loved for nearly 3 decades. But suddenly that peace felt like a mask he could no longer read. Daniel whispered softly, almost to himself, "Who was that man?" Morning came too quickly. Clara was already dressed when Daniel walked into the kitchen. She was typing something on her phone while sipping coffee. "Morning," she said, without looking up. "Morning." Daniel poured himself a cup of coffee and watched her quietly. "Big day today?" he asked. Clara nodded. "Very. Investors meeting this afternoon." She grabbed her hand back. "I might be late again tonight." Daniel forced a small nod. "All right." Clara walked over and kissed his cheek. "Take care of yourself." Then she left. The front door closed. Daniel stood there for several seconds, staring at the empty doorway. Then he whispered something he had never said in 28 years of marriage. "I need to know the truth." He grabbed his keys. For the first time in his life, Daniel decided to follow his wife. He kept several cars between them as Clara's black SUV drove through the busy morning traffic. Daniel's heart pounded like a drum. He kept asking himself the same question. What am I hoping to find? Or maybe the better question was, what am I afraid to find? Clara eventually pulled into the underground parking lot of her company headquarters. Daniel stayed outside and parked across the street. He watched employees walking into the tall glass building, confident professionals, executives, assistants, people who probably admired Clara as a brilliant leader. None of them knew the storm growing inside Daniel. 2 hours passed. Daniel sat in the car watching the entrance. Then something unexpected happened. A black luxury sedan pulled into the parking lot. A tall man stepped out, well-dressed, confident. He walked straight toward the building entrance. The security guard at the door greeted him with a wide smile. "Good morning, sir." The man laughed warmly. "Morning." Daniel's chest tightened. He watched carefully. The guard opened the door immediately and said something that made Daniel's blood run cold. "Your wife is already inside, sir." The man nodded casually. "Of course she is. She's always early." Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel. His heart was now pounding violently. The man disappeared inside the building. Daniel whispered slowly, "That's him." The world around him suddenly felt unreal. He sat frozen for several minutes before finally starting the car. He drove away slowly. His mind was spinning. There was no more doubt. The security guard hadn't made a mistake. There really was another man, another husband. Daniel arrived home feeling like a stranger inside his own body. He sat on the couch and stared at the wedding photo hanging on the wall. Clara in her white dress, him in his suit, both smiling like two people who believed their love could never break. Daniel stood up suddenly. "No," he said firmly, "I need proof." The next few days became a quiet investigation. Daniel paid attention to every detail. Clara's phone calls, her schedule, her sudden trips. Then on Thursday evening, something unusual happened. Clara came home early, 7:30 p.m. She looked relaxed. "Daniel," she said cheerfully, "I'm traveling tomorrow morning." Daniel looked up from the newspaper. "Where to?" "Port Harcourt." "How long?" "Just the weekend." Daniel nodded slowly. "Business conference?" "Yes." She smiled and walked into the bedroom. But Daniel noticed something strange. She didn't start packing. Instead, she spent almost 20 minutes texting someone, her face glowing slightly every time her phone buzzed. Daniel pretended not to notice, but inside his chest something heavy was forming. Later that night, Clara finally packed a small suitcase. "Flight is early," she said. "I'll leave around 6. "All right," Daniel replied calmly, but he already knew what he was going to do. Friday morning arrived. Clara kissed him goodbye and left the house at exactly 6:05 a.m. Daniel waited 10 minutes, then he grabbed his keys again. He followed her car from a distance, but this time, Clara didn't drive toward the airport. She drove toward the city center. Daniel frowned. That's not the airport road. His heart began racing again. Clara's car eventually turned into a quiet, upscale neighborhood filled with luxury apartments. Daniel slowed down. "What are you doing here?" he whispered. Clara parked outside a tall white apartment building. Daniel parked 2 buildings away. From his car, he watched carefully. Clara stepped out with her suitcase, but before she could even reach the building entrance, the same man from the office parking lot walked out to greet her. Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. The man smiled widely. "There you are," he said. Clara laughed softly. "Did you miss me already?" The man walked over and kissed her. Not a friendly kiss, a long, familiar kiss. Daniel's world shattered in that moment. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Clara pulled back and smiled at the man. "I told Daniel I had a business trip," she said quietly. The man chuckled. "And he believed you?" "Of course," she replied. "He always does." The man took her suitcase. "Good, because I booked us a beautiful place for the weekend." Clara slipped her arm around him. "I can't wait." Daniel felt something inside him collapse. 28 years. 28 years of loyalty. 28 years of believing in one woman. And now he was sitting in a car watching her walk into another man's apartment like it was the most normal thing in the world. He whispered slowly, "How long?" The car felt suffocating. Daniel's chest rose and fell rapidly as emotions crashed over him. Shock, pain, confusion, and something else, something darker. But Daniel didn't move. He just kept watching the apartment building door where they had disappeared together, because deep down he knew something terrifying. This wasn't just an affair, this was something far bigger, and the truth he was about to uncover would be even more shocking than he imagined. If this story is shocking you already, take a second to like the video and drop a comment below. What would you do if you discovered something like this after 28 years of marriage? And make sure you subscribe, because the confrontation that's coming next will change everything. Daniel sat in the car for almost an hour. He didn't start the engine. He didn't move. He just stared at the apartment building entrance where Clara had disappeared. Cars passed, people walked by. Life continued normally around him. But inside Daniel, everything had stopped. Finally, he whispered to himself, 28 years. The words felt heavy in his mouth. He remembered the promises they made on their wedding day, for better or worse, till death do us part. Daniel closed his eyes. For years, he had believed those promises meant something. Now they felt like a cruel joke. He finally started the car and drove home slowly. The entire drive felt numb. When he walked into the house, the silence hit him again. But this time, it felt different. This wasn't just their home anymore. It felt like a place built on lies. Daniel walked to the living room and sat down. Then something strange happened. He began to think. Not emotionally, not angrily, just calmly, because something about what he saw didn't add up. That man at the apartment, the way the security guard spoke at the office, the way the guard had said, her husband comes here every week. Daniel whispered slowly, this isn't just an affair. An affair would have been secret, hidden, careful. But this man walked into her company like he belonged there. The security knew him. They called him her husband. Daniel leaned forward. Which means, he murmured. His eyes widened slightly. This has been going on for a long time. A very long time. That realization hit him harder than anything else. Daniel stood up and walked to the wall where their wedding photo hung. He stared at it for a long time. You should have told me, he whispered quietly. Then he did something he had never done before. He picked up his phone and called Clara. The phone rang 3 times. Then she answered. Her voice sounded relaxed. Hi, honey. Daniel's voice was calm. Hi. There was a small pause. You called earlier than usual, Clara said lightly. Yes. Everything okay? Daniel looked at the wedding photo again. I just wanted to ask you something. Sure. Daniel took a slow breath. Where are you right now? There was a brief silence. Then Clara replied smoothly, at the airport. Daniel closed his eyes. I see. Yes, Clara continued casually. Flight was delayed, actually. I might board soon. Daniel nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see him. All right. Why do you ask? She said. I just wanted to hear your voice. Clara laughed softly. That's sweet. Daniel said nothing. Then Clara added, Don't worry, I'll call you when I land. Okay. Take care of yourself. You too. The call ended. Daniel lowered the phone slowly. Then he whispered something that sounded almost like disbelief. She's still lying. For a moment, anger flashed through him, but it disappeared just as quickly. Instead, something else took its place. Clarity. Daniel walked to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. He took a long sip. Then he spoke quietly. If she can lie this easily, then there's more I don't know. The next 2 days felt like the longest days of Daniel's life. Clara sent messages pretending she was at a conference, pictures of hotel rooms, photos of conference halls, voice notes saying things like, busy day today, just finished a meeting, miss you. Daniel read every message carefully. Each one felt like another knife, but he never confronted her, not yet, because Daniel wanted the full truth.
Sunday evening, Clara finally returned home. She walked through the front door smiling. Daniel? He was sitting on the couch. Yes. She dropped her suitcase and walked over. Whew, long weekend, she sighed. Then she kissed his cheek. I missed you. Daniel looked at her calmly. Did you? Clara frowned slightly. Of course I did. Daniel studied her face. She looked completely normal, relaxed, confident, like someone who believed her secret was safe. Daniel asked calmly, Did the conference go well? Yes, she replied quickly. Very productive. Daniel nodded slowly. That's good. Clara loosened her jacket. What did you do this weekend? Daniel answered quietly. I drove around the city. Oh? Yes. Clara smiled casually. Sometimes that helps clear the mind. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, it does. There was a small silence between them. Then Clara looked at him more carefully. You seem different, she said. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Different how? I don't know, she replied slowly. Quieter. Daniel stood up. I guess I've just been thinking. About what? Daniel looked directly into her eyes. About us. Clara laughed lightly. That sounds serious. It is. Her smile faded slightly. What do you mean? Daniel took a slow breath. Then he said something that made Clara's expression freeze. I went to your office last week. Clara blinked. You did? Yes. Why? Daniel's voice remained calm. I wanted to surprise you. Oh, Clara said quickly. I must have been in a meeting. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, you probably were. Clara relaxed slightly. You should have called me. I tried to go inside, Daniel continued. Her eyes flickered for a moment. Oh? But security stopped me. Clara swallowed. They're strict about visitors. Yes, Daniel said softly. They are. Then he delivered the sentence that made the colors slowly drain from her face. They laughed when I said I was your husband. Clara froze. The room went silent. Daniel's voice remained steady. Clara, how many husbands do you have? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The silence between them felt heavy enough to break the walls. Daniel watched her carefully. 28 years of love, 28 years of trust, all hanging in that moment. And the truth Clara was about to reveal would change both their lives forever. If you've made it this far into the story, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And tell us in the comments right now, what do you think Clara is going to say? Because the answer Daniel was about to hear would be even more shocking than he ever imagined.
Daniel stood in the living room, staring at Clara. For the first time in 28 years, the woman he loved seemed like a stranger. Her calm, confident mask was cracking, just enough to reveal a glimpse of guilt. Clara, tell me the truth, Daniel said slowly, his voice low but firm. How long has this been going on? Clara's eyes widened, and for a moment there was silence. Then she sighed, a mix of resignation and relief. Daniel, I never wanted you to find out like this, she whispered. Daniel's chest tightened. Then how? How could you live with me for 28 years and have another life? She looked down, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. It started before we even became successful. I met him. He's part of the company I built. I didn't plan it this way. I thought I could manage it, keep it separate, and I told myself it was only temporary. Temporary? Daniel echoed, his jaw tightening. For 28 years? Clara swallowed hard. I know it's unforgivable. I love you, Daniel. I always have. But this other relationship, it became complicated. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could protect you while living both lives. Daniel's hands trembled slightly. He turned away, trying to control his emotions.
Do you have any idea what this feels like? Watching the woman I built my life with walking into another man's apartment smiling like I don't exist. Clara stepped closer. I am so sorry. I never stopped loving you. You are my husband, my life, but I made terrible choices. Daniel's gaze softened slightly, though the pain was still raw. Then why? He admitted, tears forming. Fear. Fear of losing the empire we built. Fear of being vulnerable. Fear that you wouldn't understand. He took a deep breath, his mind a whirlwind of anger, heartbreak, and confusion. I don't understand, Clara, and maybe I never will, but I need to think. I need space. Clara nodded slowly. I'll give you all the space you need, but please remember, despite everything, I love you. Daniel looked at her one last time, a mix of longing and sorrow in his eyes. I loved you for 28 years. I need to figure out if I can continue after this. She stepped back, nodding, silent tears running down her cheeks. Daniel turned and walked toward the hallway, leaving the house feeling both heavier and freer than he had in decades. The truth was out, the lies exposed, and nothing would ever be the same. But he knew one thing. He would never be the same Daniel again. Outside, the city lights flickered, indifferent to the storm inside the Mensa household. And somewhere in the quiet, Daniel whispered to himself, love shouldn't hurt like this. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss more shocking real-life stories like this one.